When my deployment orders finally ended after 11 exhausting months at Fort Bliss, all I could think about was wrapping my arms around my 6-year-old daughter, Lily. Every lonely night overseas had been worth it because I pictured her running into my arms at the airport with that missing front tooth and those wild curls bouncing everywhere. My husband, Ethan, insisted he couldn't make the trip because of work. So I rented a car and drove the last 2 hours to our home outside Colorado Springs, convinced I'd surprise them instead. I smiled the entire drive, rehearsing the moment I'd hear Lily scream, "Mommy!" But the second I pulled into our driveway, something felt wrong. The swing set I'd built before leaving was gone. The flower pots Lily used to water every Saturday had disappeared. Even the family photos hanging beside the front window were missing. I unlocked the door with my spare key, only to discover the locks had been changed. Before I could process it, Ethan opened the door just enough to block the entrance. He looked at me like I was a complete stranger. "You shouldn't be here," he said coldly. I laughed because I honestly thought he was joking. Then I asked where Lily was. His expression never changed. Instead, he handed me a thick envelope and told me everything had already been settled. Inside were divorce papers, custody documents, and something that made my knees buckle, a DNA report claiming I wasn't Lily's biological mother. I read the words again and again, unable to breathe. It made no sense. I had carried Lily for 9 months. I remembered every kick, every ultrasound, every painful contraction before holding her for the first time. Yet this report declared there was zero biological relationship between us. Ethan calmly told me the hospital had apparently switched babies after delivery and that the court had already ruled it was in Lily's best interest to stay with the only real family she had left. I demanded to see my daughter, but he stepped outside and shut the door behind him. "If you don't leave," he warned, "I'll call the police." My hands were shaking so badly, I nearly dropped the papers. Across the street, our elderly neighbor, Mrs. Dawson, quietly watched from her porch. She gave me a look that wasn't pity. It was fear. Just before Ethan walked back inside, she mouthed 4 words I will never forget. "Don't believe those papers." In that moment, every instinct I trusted as a soldier screamed the same thing. This wasn't a mistake. Someone had planned every single second of my return long before I came home. I barely slept that night. I sat in a cheap motel staring at the ceiling while the envelope lay open beside me, reading those DNA results over and over until sunrise. Every memory of Lily's birth replayed in my head so clearly that I could still hear her first cry. No report in the world could erase that. The next morning, I hired a family attorney with the last of my deployment savings. After reading everything, he leaned back in his chair with a troubled look. "I've never seen a case move this fast," he admitted. "Divorce, custody, amended birth records, all while you were deployed." That sentence hit me harder than anything. Someone hadn't just prepared for my return. They had spent months building a case while I was serving my country. We immediately filed an emergency request to see Lily, but the judge denied it until another hearing could be scheduled. Walking out of the courthouse, I caught sight of Ethan holding Lily's hand across the parking lot. She looked smaller than I remembered, clutching her stuffed rabbit against her chest. Before I could call her name, Ethan quickly turned her toward his truck. She glanced over her shoulder for just a second. Our eyes met, and I saw confusion instead of recognition. It was as if someone had convinced her I wasn't coming back. That broke something inside me. 2 days later, I finally received supervised visitation for 30 minutes. The room felt colder than any military bunker I'd ever slept in. Lily sat across from me without speaking. She wouldn't even look directly at me. Finally, she whispered, "Daddy said you're not really my mommy anymore." I felt my heart stop. I reached for her little hand, but she hesitated before letting me hold it. Fighting tears, I asked who had told her that. "Grandma showed me the paper," she answered. She said my real family found me. I wanted to scream, but instead, I smiled through the pain and told her something she'd always remember. "Sweetheart, nobody on earth can replace your mom." Before I could say another word, the social worker announced our visit was over. As Ethan collected Lily, she quietly slipped something into my jacket pocket without him noticing. I waited until they drove away before pulling it out. It was a tiny folded drawing she'd made with purple crayons. It showed the 3 of us holding hands, but someone had scratched my face out with a black marker. On the back, written in shaky little letters, were 6 words that made my blood run cold. "Grandma said to hate you?" I drove back to the motel gripping. Lily's drawing so tightly that the edges bent in my hand. I couldn't stop staring at those 6 words. They didn't sound like something a 6-year-old would invent. They sounded rehearsed, planted, repeated until she believed them. The next morning, my attorney arranged for a private investigator named Rachel, a former military police officer who had handled fraud cases for years. She listened without interrupting, then spread every document across a conference table. Within 15 minutes, she pointed to something none of us had noticed. The DNA report had been issued by a laboratory neither of us recognized. When she searched its certification number, nothing came up. It simply didn't exist. My heart pounded. If the lab was fake, then every decision based on that report could unravel. Rachel dug deeper while I began calling the hospital where Lily was born. After being transferred from one department to another, a records supervisor finally answered. She sounded confused when I explained the supposed baby switch. "Ma'am," she said carefully, "we have no incident report, no internal investigation, and no notification sent to you. If something like that had happened, it would have generated hundreds of pages of documentation." My stomach turned. Ethan had sworn the hospital admitted the mistake. Now the hospital was telling me nothing had ever happened. That afternoon, Rachel called with another discovery. The fake laboratory had been registered only 8 months earlier, using a mailbox at a shipping store in another state. Even stranger, the business license had been signed by a company owned by Ethan's college roommate. We finally had the first crack in his story. But before we could celebrate, another blow landed. My bank notified me that nearly all the money I'd saved during deployment had been withdrawn weeks earlier using a power of attorney with my signature. I had never signed it. Someone had forged my name and emptied almost everything I had. The betrayal wasn't just about Lily anymore. It had been a calculated attack on every part of my life. That evening, I returned to the neighborhood, hoping to speak with Mrs. Dawson. She invited me inside, locked the front door, and lowered her voice. "I wanted to tell you months ago," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "But Ethan threatened me." She reached into a kitchen drawer and handed me a flash drive. "My security camera records everything facing your driveway. The day after you deployed, I saw people carrying boxes out of your house. They weren't moving furniture." She looked straight into my eyes before finishing the sentence that changed everything. "They were carrying boxes filled with your military records, medical files, and Lily's birth documents." I rushed the flash drive straight to Rachel's office. We plugged it into her computer, and within seconds the screen filled with security. Footage from Mrs. Dawson's porch camera. The timestamp showed it was only 3 weeks after I had deployed. Ethan wasn't alone. His mother was directing 2 men as they carried sealed file boxes out of my garage and loaded them into a rented moving truck. I recognized those boxes immediately. They held every important document I owned, including my military records, Lily's birth certificate, insurance files, and the lockbox where I kept certified copies of medical paperwork. Rachel paused the video when Ethan opened the lockbox. Even through the grainy footage, it was obvious he was searching for something specific. "He wasn't stealing random papers," she said quietly. "He was building a story." Within hours, she subpoenaed the truck rental company. The inventory sheet listed the destination of a storage unit just 20 minutes away. When investigators obtained a warrant and opened it, they found shelves packed with my missing belongings. My uniforms, deployment journals, tax records, family photo albums, and even the baby blanket Lily had come home from the hospital wrapped in were stacked neatly inside. Hidden beneath one box sat a laptop that had been wiped clean, but forensic specialists recovered deleted emails. As they appeared one after another, my attorney let out a slow breath. Ethan had exchanged dozens of messages with his college roommate months before I left. They discussed creating a laboratory website, designing official-looking DNA reports, and finding a cooperative notary willing to stamp forged documents. One email stopped everyone in the room. Ethan had written, "Once she's deployed, she'll have no way to fight back. By the time she gets home, the judge will think the case is already settled." Reading those words felt like being punched in the chest. He hadn't acted out of anger or desperation. He had planned to erase me from my daughter's life before my plane had even taken off. The evidence was overwhelming, but Rachel warned me not to celebrate yet. "People like Ethan don't give up when they're cornered," she said. She was right. Less than 24 hours later, I received a call from an unknown number. I answered, expecting another investigator. Instead, I heard Ethan's voice, calm, cold, almost amused. Drop the case, he said. You already lost once. If you keep digging, you'll never see Lily again. Then he hung up. Minutes later, my phone buzzed with a new notification. Someone had slipped a single photograph under my motel room door. It was Lily standing outside her elementary school that very morning. On the back, written in black marker, were 5 chilling words. You're running out of time. The photograph shook me, but it also handed my attorney exactly what he needed. The image had been taken after. Ethan claimed he had no contact with me outside the court process, and the threat written on the back gave the judge a reason to approve. Emergency protection for both me and Lily at the final hearing. Ethan walked into the courtroom wearing the same confident smile he'd worn since. I came home. His mother sat behind him, certain they had already won. Then Rachel placed the recovered emails, the fake laboratory records, the forged power of attorney, and Mrs. Dawson's security footage into evidence. The courtroom fell silent as the video showed. Ethan opening my lockbox and removing Lily's birth records months before the DNA report even existed. His attorney tried to object, but the judge allowed the evidence. Next came the hospital administrator, who testified that no baby swap had ever occurred and that every original maternity record identified me as Lily's mother. Finally, the state's forensic examiner explained that the DNA report wasn't merely inaccurate, it had been manufactured using copied templates and forged signatures. The judge turned toward Ethan and asked one simple question. Did you create this fraud? For the first time since I'd returned home, he couldn't speak. His silence said everything. Within minutes, the judge dismissed every custody order obtained through the fake evidence, restored my parental rights in full, and referred the case for criminal prosecution. As deputies approached Ethan, he looked at me with panic instead of arrogance. His mother burst into tears, begging the judge for mercy, but there was none left to give. Outside the courtroom, a social worker brought Lily to me. She hesitated for one heartbreaking second before running into my arms so hard we both nearly fell over. She buried her face against my shoulder and whispered, I knew you'd come back. Cried harder than I had during any deployment because those were the words I'd been waiting to hear since the day I walked up to my own front door and found my family stolen from me. Rebuilding our lives wasn't easy. Lily needed counseling to heal from months of manipulation, and I had to learn how to trust people again. But little by little, our home became peaceful. We planted flowers together, hung family pictures back on the walls, and every night she insisted I read the same bedtime story I'd read before leaving for deployment. Months later, I received a letter saying Ethan had accepted a plea deal that included prison time for fraud, forgery, intimidation, and identity theft. I folded the letter, locked it away, and never looked at it again. Revenge wasn't watching him lose everything. My victory was much simpler. Every evening, when Lily wrapped her little arms around my neck and said, "Good night, Mom," I was reminded that the truth had finally brought my daughter home, and no lie would ever take her away again.